Hello, and welcome to Lecture 9 on Personality. This will be our last lecture of the chapter. So, now I want to look at biological trait theory. So, Eysenck proposed the biological trait theory of personality. And he proposed that personality traits had two major dimensions: introversion, extroversion, and emotional stability. But a third has been added, that psychoticism was later added. It reflects a mixture of aggression, poor impulse control, self-centeredness, and a lack of empathy. More recent conceptions of this trait now call it a constraint, and it's related to levels of impulse control. So let me show you an image. So here we've got various trait terms, I guess that's what you could say. And then, so here we've got the introversion and extroversion. We've got neurotic to emotionally stable. And then we have low constraint to high constraint. And so that's what they're talking about with Eysenck's trait theory. So Eysenck is saying that personality traits are based on biological processes that produce behaviors, thoughts, and emotions. He believed that it's the differences in arousal that produce the behavioral differences between extroverts and introverts. And so this level of arousal, and this is a really fascinating idea to me, this is neurological. So, you know the idea of physical homeostasis. So homeostasis is your level of optimal function. Your body temperature, heart rate, respiration. It's, when you're content and it in normal rates, you just feel good. Well, there's also that concept for arousal. I think of it as emotional homeostasis. And for introverts and extroverts, we need different levels of arousal. Now, arousal, or alertness, is regulated by the reticular activating system, the RAS. It starts in here in the limbic system, and it branches through the brainstem and goes into higher brain centers. And the reticular activating system is it's all important, but the reticular activating system is tied to sleeping, waking, attention. It helps filter information to and from the lower parts of the body. It helps sort through what's important, the sensory information what sensory information is important and what can you just kind of tune out into the background. What is a threat? What's not a threat? It helps you pay attention. And part of that attending to information is that filtering. What do I need to pay attention to and what shouldn't I pay attention to? And so the reticular activating system is a big part of this emotional homeostasis that Eysenck's talking about. And so we're not going to worry about this. When we're looking at the reticular activating system, we've got, here it starts out kind of, most of it's here, goes a little bit down the brain stem, but then you see it works with the thalamus and goes throughout other brain centers. So we know that extroverts and introverts need different levels of arousal. Extroverts are content at a higher level of arousal than introverts. Introverts have a lower level of arousal at which they're content. Whenever an introvert exceeds their level of optimal arousal, they start to get really anxious and overwhelmed. When an extrovert is below their level of optimal arousal, they get bored and restless. Now, anyone that's below their optimal arousal gets bored and restless, and anyone who's above their level is going to be anxious and overwhelmed. But the level of arousal needed for an introvert to be comfortable is much lower than what an extrovert needs to be comfortable. So, extroverts just need a higher level of arousal from their environment, where introverts need a lower level of arousal. And this is one of the reasons introverts tend to withdraw. We get a little more over aroused in social situations, and we do so more quickly than an extrovert would. So Jeffrey Gray proposed that personality is rooted in two motivational functions: the behavioral approach system and behavioral inhibition system. So the behavioral approach system is the GO system. This is the brain system involved in the pursuit of incentives and rewards. The behavioral inhibition system is the STOP system. This system is sensitive to punishment, and so it inhibits behavior. It stops you from engaging in behaviors. And this is actually what I did with my master's thesis, was looking at the behavioral activation system and behavioral inhibition system. So, what we know about extroverts: they are particularly responsive to rewards. They don't respond to punishment very well. So my sister is extremely extroverted. My poor parents. Punishing her just didn't really do much. She did much better with rewards. Lori was going constantly. Every moment that she was awake, she was on go. Every day was green light all day, every day. She's very extroverted. For me, poor little Lisa, high on neuroticism, low on extroversion, introverts are very sensitive to punishment. So when it comes to child-rearing, introverted children, punishment is very effective. Extroverted children, rewards work better. Interestingly, introverts are less responsive to caffeine. So a cup of coffee does less for an introvert than it does for an extrovert. I don't know why. It just does. Okay. So the behavioral activation system is linked to extroversion. We know that extroverts are more influenced by rewards than by punishments. Rewards are much, much more effective with extroverts. And extroverts tend to act impulsively in the face of strong rewards, even if they've just been punished for being impulsive. And that's because of the behavioral activation system. They're just on green light all the time. And the stronger they are on extroversion, the stronger that behavioral activation system is. The higher the amount of arousal they need to be content. The behavioral inhibition system is linked to neuroticism, but also introversion. So people high on neuroticism become anxious in social situations and tend to anticipate negative outcomes. And so this could explain the correlation between, on the Big Five theory, trait theory, the correlation between neuroticism and being low on extroversion. So different brain regions are involved in emotion and reward that underlie the behavioral inhibition system and behavioral activation system. So this is all neurological. This is in the brain. And that's something that I think is hard. When someone is very extroverted, we've got to remember that this is their nervous system. They are just very, very active, and sometimes that's really annoying in a 5-year-old. That's just because they're so extroverted that they just need a high level of arousal to be content. And when someone's really introverted, they get really overwhelmed quickly. Their level of arousal threshold is very low. And when they exceed that comes with a lot of anxiety. And because this is neurological, we have to help kids learn how to operate with their activation system or inhibition system, rather than thinking that we're going to change it. And I think that really is a lot of what personality is learning how to work with your traits instead of fighting them. Sometimes we perceive different traits have different social connotations. So in Western cultures, extroversion is very, very much rewarded. Introverts are at a disadvantage. But what it really comes down to is just helping introverts learn how to operate in an extroverted world. It's not that introversion is a negative. It's just we have to learn how to operate in an extroverted world. But interestingly, in Eastern cultures, introversion is more... Eastern cultures expect people to be quieter. And so introversion isn't quite as restricted. Okay. So the big picture, let's wrap it up. Temperament is biological. Your personality is psychological, sociological. We are complicated beings, and we are more than the sum of our traits. Trait theory is huge in personality psychology, but every trait theorist will tell you we are more than our traits. We are complicated beings. Now, we're not at the mercy of our environment or our DNA. The beauty of traits is that they give us a framework from which to explore the world and navigate the world. We're able to work opposite of our traits when we have to, and we learn that flexibility because we're not at the mercy of our environment or our DNA. It just takes time and growth. A lot of child development is just trying to figure out who you are and how to work in a world that demands that you be, that sometimes you restrain who you are. Personality can be messy, and that's a good thing because it is evidence of adaptability. And adaptability, in my opinion, is a big part of being successful in the way you define success for yourself. We all have to learn how to be adaptable. And we do that through our own traits. So as we get to know ourselves and become more comfortable with ourselves, kind of learn to embrace our individual differences, we can learn to become adaptable. So personality is messy, and that's okay. There is no correct theory of personality. Each theory brings something to the explanation of what it means to be human and what it means to be an individual human being. Thank you so much for your time.